All right, well, let's begin tonight. I felt like I needed to put a pause on the End of the Age series and hit something that's extremely relevant, very controversial within Christianity today. I put a post on Facebook this afternoon, or a post was put on Facebook this afternoon about me doing this teaching tonight, and scores of comments and dialogue and debate are all over the place. Christians saying, I think there's nothing wrong with keeping Halloween. Other ones saying, no, we shouldn't keep it on Halloween. And we could do it with here's how you need to do it, and everything in between. And so there's definitely not a lot of clarity on this subject just by the comments that were placed today on Facebook. So tonight I'm going to spend the rest of the evening in this teaching going through and unpacking where Halloween came from. Should Christians and should believers celebrate this holiday? If we should celebrate this holiday, how do we celebrate this holiday? Should we have an alternative to this holiday? So on and so forth. So we're going to answer all of those questions and more. And in PFT fashion, we're going to dig back into real history, pull out facts. We're not going to pull out opinions. We're not going to pull out church-run facts of rewriting history. We're going to go all the way back, thousands of years, and we're going to discover where the roots of Halloween came from. Are you ready? All right, let's dig in. Today, it is the second most popular holiday next to Christmas. Can you believe that? And you should believe that because when you walk into the stores in August, there are Halloween costumes and paraphernalia starting to be put up in Walmarts and in grocery stores and so on and so forth. They're rearranging aisles to make room for all of that stuff that people buy. It is the second most popular holiday. Over $15 billion will be spent around around Halloween. $15 billion is going to be spent this year on Halloween. Get this, over 400 million of that is going to be spent on pets getting costumes. That's how ridiculous it is today. People are now getting costumes for their pets. You can't leave the pet out of the equation. So 400 million will be spent on pet costumes alone. Listen, more and more Christians are engaging in Halloween and being encouraged to do so by their pastors, bishops, priests, elders, and even some of the most prominent Christian leaders in America. Recently, an article was given by one of the most popular Christian actors in America today, interviewed in the Huffington Post as of this week, coming out and saying that Christians should have the largest block parties on the planet, in America, on Halloween. Here's what he had to say. This comes directly from the Christian Post, one of the largest Christian newspapers online. Quote, early on, Christians would dress up in costumes as the devil, ghosts, goblins, and witches, precisely to make the point that those things were defeated and overthrown by the resurrected Jesus Christ. You should have the biggest party on your block, he told CP, Christian Post. Halloween gives you the opportunity to show how Christians celebrate the day that death was defeated, and you can give them gospel tracts and tell the story of how every ghost, goblin, witch, and demon was trounced the day that Jesus rose from the grave. Clearly, no Christians ought to be glorifying death because death was defeated, and that was the point of All Hallows Eve. Now, at a cursory view, this might even inspire some of you. It looks good. It sounds good. It sounds spiritual. But what I want to do as a historian is I want to go back and I want to unpack these historical statements that he just made and make sure that they're accurate. Because when you say that early on Christians would dress up in costumes, well, how early are you talking? How early are you talking about in the 70s? Or 70 AD. There's a big difference. And so there is a connotation that comes from this. There's an aroma that comes from these quotes that make you feel like he's talking about early Christians. When I say early Christians, I am clearly talking about first century Christians. Most Christians, when they read this, would automatically put that mindset in. So there is, in a way, a very deceiving, even though I believe it's completely unintentional by the one who made this statement, but there is a deceiving color that comes from this that, listen, early Christians dressed up like ghosts and goblins, and the point and the purpose of doing that was to mock them. So I took the liberty upon myself to go back in history, 100 year by 100 year, millennium by millennium, all the way back thousands of years to find out where these traditions came from, to find out that is this statement true? Did anyone at any time outside of modern history ever dress up to mock demons? We're going to discover that. And then lastly, I highlighted this one quote. It was the point of All Hallows Eve was to show that Jesus rose from the dead, and the point was to show that he had victory over death. Let's discover if All Hallows Eve, which eventually evolved into the term Halloween, if that really was an accurate statement. Did it really start out, and is the point and purpose of All Hallows Eve to glorify life? Let's dig in. First of all, the history of Halloween starts with a holiday, an ancient Celtic holiday. It's not pronounced Samhain. It's pronounced Samhain. Okay? So Samhain is an ancient Celtic holiday that is thousands of years old. And this is where virtually all scholars in academia find their way back to when they want to do historical traces of Halloween. This is actually where you go to. All Saints' Day, or All Hallows Eve, is much later on the timeline, as we're going to discover. So I want to go to Encyclopedia Britannica. I trust Encyclopedia Britannica on most things. They do a pretty good job of doing historical records. So let's find out from them a little bit about this Halloween day. In ancient Britain and Ireland, the Celtic festival of Samhain Eve was observed on October 31st, at the end of summer. It was an occasion for one of the ancient fire festivals when huge bonfires were set on hilltops to frighten away evil spirits. The souls of the dead were thought to revisit their homes on this day, and the autumn festival acquired sinister significance with ghosts, witches, hobgoblins, black cats, fairies, and demons of all kinds said to be roaming about. In addition, Halloween was thought to be the most favorable time for divinations concerning marriage, luck, health, and death. So right away, if I did not tell you this was the festival of Samhain, you would automatically be thinking Halloween, because this describes it to a T, and we haven't even gotten started yet. Ladies and gentlemen, let's continue. Samhain, also spelled this way, one of the most important and sinister calendar festivals of the Celtic year. At Samhain, held on November 1st, so it's October 31st to November 1st, the world of the gods was believed to be made visible to mankind. And the gods played many tricks on their mortal worshippers. It was a time fraught with danger, charged with fear, and full of supernatural episodes. Sacrifices and propitiations of every kind were thought to be vital, for without them the Celts believed they would not prevail over the perils of the season or counteract the activities of the deities. Samhain was an important precursor to Halloween. So, ladies and gentlemen, we see right off the bat that the actual origin of Halloween had nothing to do with All Hallows Eve, that we're going to see evolved from the Catholic Church, that its roots go all the way back into a pagan cultic festival called Samhain, where they believed that the curtain or the veil between earth and the second dimension of the demons, the demonic realm, or the place of the dead, was thinned. And at that place on October 31st and November 1st, the veil was thinned, and that allowed spirits of the dead to transfer from the place in the abode of the dead into the place of the living. And because of that, there were many supernatural things that happened during those time periods, and so a lot of cultural traditions developed to counter what they called, some of them, the gods. Okay? Today, even, In Satanism, the high holy day, guess when it is? October 31st. Where do you think they get that from? Is it made up? They too believe. The Wiccans believe. The actual pagan religion, the pagans believe. They'll even tell you on their own websites that I saw this quote. It said, Christians, comma, you can thank us for Christmas, Easter, and Halloween. And they know that. And actually, I read multiple articles on pagan, Wiccan, and occultic websites that are angry that Christians celebrate their holidays. They feel like that Christians are hijacking their holy days. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a strange paradox when you have Satanists that are upset because Christians are celebrating their holy day. Something's not right with that statement. And as we walk through the timeline here, we're going to find out whether Christians can hijack, whether we should redeem, and whether it can be redeemed or not. What does the Bible say? So first of all, in the history timeline, from the Celts, they celebrated this festival called Samhain, and then along came the Romans. And the Romans took over the Celts. After conquering the Irish and the Celts in the 1st century, Samhain began to get mixed with two other Roman feasts for the dead, because the Romans had their own feast for the dead. Those were called Pomona Day and Feralia. So Pomona Day and Feralia, two feasts that were integrated into Samhain. How many know that every time a country takes over another country, there's a mixture of traditions? Okay? What is the best expression of that here in the United States? Everything we do. The United States is a melting pot, is it not? So look at all the traditions from Ireland that have come in, from Scotland, from even Great Britain, from Mexico. Okay, there is all kinds of traditions that are melt in a culture that gets mixed with another culture, and that's exactly what happened when the Romans took over the Celts in the 1st century. Is that the Samhain festival? The Romans now are living amongst the Celts are living amongst the Romans, and there was a mixture of, hey, that's kind of cool in your holiday, let's mix that in here, and that's pretty neat, you guys do that, let's do this. And then those holidays began to merge. So I'm going to show you some of the things and how they merged on the timeline. For instance, Feralia was held on February 21st and was the day to honor the dead. But like other Roman holidays, it was completely filled with drunkenness, orgies, fornication, all kinds of crazy stuff. Very similar to the Feast of Saturnalia, of which was a 12-day feast, of which we get the 12 days of Christmas from. Yes, I'm sorry if you haven't watched Truth or Tradition. Now would probably be a good time to do that before you get too upset with me. But yes, that's where these holidays come from. They come all the way back into the 2,000 plus years ago. Pomona Day, on the other hand, was November 1st. This was a day to honor the goddess Pomona, who's the goddess of trees, fertility, and fruits. And you know what her sacred symbol was? None other than the apple. Okay, we'll come back to that a little bit later, and you'll see that there's a connection all the way back to the garden of why her her symbol was the apple. So there was a day in Roman times on November 1st called Pomona Day. That's where they honored the goddess Pomona, and her major symbol was the apple, and of course she was the goddess of fruit trees. Next comes along the Catholic Church. Just a few hundred short years later, we've got this. Having multiple days for remembering the dead saints and martyrs, the Catholic Church agreed that there should be one day for all of the saints. And so what was happening in Catholicism, very, very early Catholicism in the 3rd and 4th century, is that a martyr, or what can be considered a saint, and you were automatically a saint if you were martyred, and that's how they began. So when you became a saint in the Roman Catholic Church, they believed in remembering your death and honoring you in your death. And that's fine and dandy, but what happened was multiple people began to be saints, so many that they would have dates booked up every month throughout the month. They were remembering the dead every day. So there was a logic that went in that said, hey, listen, there's too many dead saints to all remember individually. Let's package them all together. A political, logical move was made, and let's put them all into one day, and we'll call it All Saints' Day. So with the backing of the Roman government, okay, because at that time the church and the government were working hand in hand, it was decided to whitewash the Roman Day of the Dead and turn it into the day of remembering and praying to the dead saints. So remember, much of what we get in history today comes from a political process, a compromising of church and state for the betterment of the people. So, in quotes there. Because what happened is that they thought, okay, there's already a day of remembering the dead in Rome. So in the church side of Rome, the church side of Rome and the state side of Rome, the church side of the Rome, who's really connected arm and body with the state side of Rome, or the government side, said, well, if we're going to do that, let's just pick a day that will be easier for everybody, and let's take over the Roman Day of the Dead, because we don't really agree with that whole Roman Day of the Dead anyway. But if we use their day, then people will remember the saints. And so that was the logic behind that. And really, ultimately, it kind of made sense. If you didn't have a biblical background and you didn't know what the front of the book said, then this was a good move. And so they made this move, and that day ended up being, when you get to Ephraim Cyrus, who died in 373, he mentions that there's a feast dedicated to the saints in his writing. So we know historically that as early as in the 370s that there definitely was one day set aside to remember the saints. Then comes along John Chrysostom, who died in 407. Now this guy, if you do any homework on him, he's a major saint in Catholicism. Not only in Catholicism, but he's one of the saints that has crossed over into Protestantism and became a church father, or someone that is held in tremendous high esteem in Protestantism. Even Christianity Today, I believe, wrote an article about and esteemed him greatly as a church leader. He was called the Golden Mouth because he was so articulate. He captivated thousands of people with his messages and his sermons, and he was only in his 20s when he went into full-time ministry. He was very gifted, came from a wealthy family. The problem with Mr. Chrysostom is that he lacked a true biblical understanding of the Hebraic background of the faith. And so it would not surprise you that he was incredibly anti-Semitic. And so when he comes along, what he does is he puts a stamp on this All Saints Day, and he says that we're going to fix it to the first Sunday after Pentecost. Then from him, we're actually going to make this even more solid. The name was changed because the name originally was Feralia. Even though they had it for All Saints Day, there was no All Saints Day name. It was a day for all the saints, but they still used the name Feralia. So they changed the name from Feralia to All Saints Day, and the date was changed to kill two birds with one stone. They changed it to May 13th. May 13th, 609 AD, Pope Boniface IV dedicated the Pantheon in Rome in commemoration of all Christian martyrs. And that, even in his historical Catholic records, is the day that All Saints' Day was born. Now, what their historians will tell you in Catholicism is that All Saints' Day was born right here in 609 AD, had nothing to do with paganism, and it had to do with the christening, if you will, of the Pantheon to be a church, and to remember all of the martyrs in All Saints' Day. The problem is that they didn't just choose May 13 as just an ambiguous number picked out of a hat to commemorate the Christian church here at Rome, the Pantheon. It was chosen for a reason. May 13 was chosen. Why was it chosen May 13th? Because that was the day of the Roman Lemuria festival. So the Lemuria festival was a major pagan festival where the head of the household would get up at midnight and perform a ritual to exorcise and remove dead spirits from their homes. So the Catholic Church's agenda throughout the centuries was to take the pagan holidays and begin to take them over, which sounds totally spiritual. We're going to discover as we go on is that biblical? Do we have the right to take over these days or not?